I've always been fascinated about conversational interfaces and the ability to interact with computers using natural language. For example, I was always amazed how my 3-year-old could just call me whenever he wanted by just saying, "Alexa, call Dad." With generative AI, we have the potential to revolutionize the workplace by enabling every single employee to excel at their job by using natural language interfaces. So today, we're going to talk about how you can leverage generative AI to boost productivity for every employee in your business. I'm Vikram Anbaragan. I'm General Manager for the Amazon Q service, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. But before we start, can I have a show of hands about how many of you have tried to build your own generative AI-powered assistant by using tools that are available out there? Okay, quite a few of you. All right. So today, this is what we'll be covering. And I'll start with the opportunity in front of us. Here's just a sample of all the various types of roles in an enterprise and different types of employees that could exist in an enterprise. So let's take the example of a marketing manager. They need to, let's say they're launching a new product. They need to figure out, OK, how do I succinctly summarize what are the main capabilities of this product? They'll need to write product detail pages. They need to generate blogs, optimize their pages for search engine optimization, and so on. A research scientist would need to look through all the prior results, understand what was done in what research, compare the side effects of all of those trials, and then figure out what the next steps need to be. A sales manager, maybe they have a new account that they've inherited. They need to understand what happened in the past, what the customer wants, and what their approach needs to be in order to successfully handle this new customer, and so on and so forth. The opportunity with generative AI is that we can make the life of all of these employees better and make them all more efficient. So in a recent study, McKinsey estimated that Gen AI can simplify work activities that take up to 25% of your daily time. So that's about 2 hours of savings for every employee. Now that we see that this is a great opportunity in front of us, what are the challenges? What's stopping us from leveraging Gen AI? We see 3 big challenges. First, accuracy. Finding the most accurate result from across millions of documents in your enterprise is a very challenging task. Number 2, security and control over the behavior of these LLMs. How do you ensure that all your employees are only seeing the documents that they have access to? How do you integrate this with your directory server to make sure the groups and the access control and all of that is maintained across all of your employees? Number 3 is time to value. In today's world, it's important to move fast because your competition is moving fast. They're quickly launching these new capabilities and rolling out cool new features for the customers. So how do you make your employees more efficient quickly rather than starting projects that last months on end and you don't know if it will be successful at the end of it? And so we launched Amazon Q yesterday in Adam's keynote. And what Q does is it's your generative AI-powered AI assistant that is specifically designed for work. And it can help you with your business, with your data, with your code, and with your operations. And to give you a broad picture of what we've launched here with Amazon Q, we have embedded Q across all of AWS. So for example, we start with Amazon Q for your business, where you can deploy Q with your own data in your enterprise. But then, if your developers are building on AWS, you can use Amazon Q to build better and get help on all of the AWS tools as they are using the AWS console and operating various different services on AWS. You also have Q in Amazon QuickSight, where you can do natural language-powered BI, business intelligence, by just asking questions like, hey, who are my top 10 customers, or can you show me which region had the most sales, and so on. We also have Q in Amazon Connect, which is our contact center software to help agents be more efficient while helping customers. And soon to come, we'll also have Q in AWS supply chain. In today's session, I'm going to focus more on Q for your business and how you can build a digital assistant for your business and all the different things that you can leverage it for to be more efficient. Some of the key features of Q can be divided into features for admins and features for end users. From an end user perspective, Q can do conventional question answering, where you are able to ask questions across all of your enterprise content, and Q is able to give you accurate answers, along with citations and ground truth so that you can verify these answers and make sure it's not hallucinating. You can upload files and analyze the content because your admin may not set up all of the files in your centralized index. You may have many files that are just on your local laptop that you may want to upload into Q and analyze them, compare them, and so on. You can even execute actions on various systems like Salesforce or Zendesk, like cutting tickets in those various systems. And you can generate content like writing emails or writing blogs or marketing copy or product detail pages or memos and so on. From an admin perspective, it's a fully managed solution. It has 40+ pre-built connectors, comes with its own vector index, and an end user application. So, this goes back to the time to value that I was talking about. You can deploy it very quickly with no need for any development work. It's permissions aware, so it's able to look at your access control list and then compare that at runtime with the permissions that the user has and only show you the documents that you have access to. And then, most importantly, from an administration perspective, it gives you controls and guardrails using which you can ensure that Q is behaving in a way that you want it to. So for example, maybe you don't want it to handle questions on certain topics, or maybe you want it to use a certain data source to handle certain topics, and so on. My colleague, Nikhil, will now take you through these features and the details of each of these features.
Thank you, Vikram. Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Thank you so much for joining this session. I'm Nikhil Shetty. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Amazon Q. And I'm here to very excited to talk about all the features that we've built in Q for you. In fact, over the past few months, I've been using Q myself, and I made it my personal assistant. And my manager suddenly tells me I'm a high performer. So I'm very, very excited to see how you can make this your own personal assistant. Let's talk about the key features. So the first one, conversational Q&A. So what you're looking at on the screen is actually a screenshot of what the end user experience will look like, which is integrated with your identity provider. When your users are asking a question, what Q does is it looks at all the documents across all of your data sources, be it SharePoint, be it Salesforce, be it OneDrive, Google Drive, looks at all of the relevant documents that will be important or relevant to the query, put all of them together, combine the information, and give you a very, very comprehensive answer, along with the sources so that you can go and fact-check the responses. So you look at a response, you're not sure whether it's accurate, you look at the sources, and make sure that the facts and the accuracy is right. In fact, for every sentence that we generate, we make sure that we give you citations for that sentence so that if there's a long response, you can always go back and see, for every sentence, you can see, well, if this fact is correct or not. Just like a natural conversation, you can continue this conversation in the context. You can ask follow-up questions. You can ask for summarization. And you can ask for even some actions, as we'll see later. And it'll understand and maintain the context. We also store the conversation history for you so that you can go back in time, see what you asked for before, and even continue the conversation to pick it up at a later point. And all of this happens with user permissions in mind. So users will never get any answers from documents that they don't have access to. Users can also upload files and ask questions. So for example, you can upload a file and ask Q to summarize the information in that file. Or you could ask questions about the content that is in the file. Or let's say if you have some numerical data, you can upload an Excel file, ask questions, do some analysis on that data, maybe even ask to write a narrative. You could even take, let's say, 2 documents together, upload those 2 documents, and say, compare these 2 documents and give me a summary of all the differences. We support multiple file types for the file upload feature. So you can use PDFs, doc, CSV, PowerPoint, text, and more. So think about some scenarios where something like this will be useful. We talked about a marketing manager earlier. Let's say you're a marketing manager, and you get a new product spec, and you've been asked to write, let's say, an advertising copy or a marketing copy in a very short time. And you don't have time to read the entire document. You can just use Q. Upload the document to Q, ask it to summarize, tell it what the key features in the product are, tell it who your audience is or target customer is, and just ask it to draft the first copy of the marketing copy or the advertising copy. And that's your starting point. Or let's say you're working on contracts, and you've gone back and forth with the customer, and you're not sure what the first contract is, what's the difference in the latest version. You can upload those 2 versions and ask you and say, what is the difference between these 2? Just summarize everything for me, and it'll do that for you. Now, when employees are working in enterprises, they're usually hopping from one application to another. As an example, someone might start with finding some information, ask questions, summarize everything they found out, and then go and file a ticket. Or someone may start with brainstorming ideas, summarize all those ideas, and they may want to share those ideas over chat or email with your colleagues. Or someone may even want to update some enterprise applications. Let's say they've had a meeting, they want to organize all the notes, and they want to update it to an enterprise application. For all such activities, we want Q to be an enabler or a starting point to be able to enable the employees to use natural language to make these tasks happen. So starting today, we are announcing support for creating tickets in Zendesk, Salesforce, Jira, and ServiceNow. So for example, a user can say, summarize the information and file a ticket in Jira, and it'll open a Jira interface for you where you can quickly submit the information and create a ticket. So talking about safety and security, top of mind for enterprise admins. And we talked about connectors that support document access control, meaning this ensures that your users never get answers from documents that they don't have access to. Now let's take a look at how that works. So when you connect your data sources into Amazon Q, think Salesforce, SharePoint, Google Drive, Confluence, whatever have you, what Q does is the connectors will go and crawl these data sources, take the content out, and put it into a semantic index for search. Now, when we do that, we not only crawl the document content, but we also crawl the document permissions. Now, what these permissions contain is a list of users and groups that have access to that document. Now, when a user is running a query against Amazon Q, we gather information about the users, of course, the user ID. But since we are integrated with the identity provider, we also find information about the groups that they are part of. And we use all of this to make sure that only those documents are pulled from the index to which they have access to. So now you don't have to worry about any documents, any sensitive documents being accidentally leaked to your users through Amazon Q. It is all supported out of the box. We also have guardrails for admins. So we have 4 types of guardrails. First, we have default guardrails that protect against queries that could generate offensive, discriminatory, or illegal content. This comes out of the box without any configuration required. So Q will just respond with, hey, sorry, I cannot help with that. If there's a question that matches with that's either offensive or discriminatory or toxic in general. Now, second, we also give you the ability to restrict responses to enterprise content only. Now, we hear this from customers all the time. They say, well, we love the properties of these LLMs, the fact that they're able to generate answers, but they don't want to hear answers from what's being trained, what the LLM has been trained with. They want answers only from enterprise content. And that's what we enable with this feature. So for example, if you restrict it to enterprise content and a user asks, tell me some ways to improve SEO for my web page. And let's say your enterprise repository does not contain the answer. Amazon Q will just respond with, sorry, I do not have enough information to answer. Now let's say on the other hand, if you do enable it to go outside of enterprise content, in that case, it'll come back and say, based on my knowledge, here are some tips to do that. So in this case, the user knows that this is not coming from the enterprise sources, but it's coming from its own knowledge, so that they can go and make sure and verify that all of the responses are actually correct. Then we have, third thing is specifying blocked words or phrases. So you can specify a list of blocked words or phrases that should never appear in the response. Imagine you have a secret project in the company, very sensitive documents, sensitive subject or keywords, that sure, you'll have access control to make sure those documents are not accessible to everyone. But big enterprises, there's always a stray document that talks about something that people should not know. And so with this, you make sure that you can say, well, for this top secret project X, make sure that this never appears in any responses. And we'll have checks and balances in place that anytime it encounters any topic like that, it'll just block it and make sure that it's not shown to users that don't have access to it. Then we also have topic-level guardrails. And so what you can do with topic guardrails is you can specify topics or special topics, and you can define treatments for those topics. And we have 4 types of treatments. The first is you can respond with a predefined message. So a query comes in, we identify that it's related to a topic that you've defined. We will respond with a predefined message that you have defined. It'll say, here's what it is. Or you could restrict it to enterprise content only. Same situation, query comes in, but it's only responding from enterprise content, not going anywhere else. Third treatment is you can restrict responses to enterprise content, but with metadata filters. So maybe you want to say for these type of queries, only go to SharePoint or only go to Google Drive. Or you may have some other metadata to identify your content, and it will only restrict it to those sources. And you can apply these topic filters to specific users and groups in enterprises. Now let's take an example scenario where this will be useful. Let's say you have a security team that has discovered vulnerabilities in your website. They've created some documents about it. That's all in your enterprise corpus. Now you want to make sure that these are not opened up to all the employees. Again, of course, there's access control, but like we said, big enterprises, very hard to control these things. So what you can do is you can create a topic and say security vulnerabilities in the website, and you can define a few sample utterances to identify what kind of questions could be asked to get to that topic. And then you can say, block this for all of my users. Well, wait, hold on though. You don't want this to block for everyone. You want to block it for people who are not in the security team. So you can go a step further and say, block this for everyone, but for the security team, restricted to only content in your enterprise repositories, so that they will access those documents. Everybody else will get a predefined response. So we talked about connectors. We have 40+ connectors for different enterprise data sources that take out the drudgery and the heavy lifting involved in bringing all of your data together into an index, extracting the content out of this, parsing everything, chunking them into sizes, taking out permissions information, metadata. All of that is completely built in. All you have to do is you go to the console, you point it to the data source, and you start the ingestion process, and we do everything for you. Our connectors also have features like periodic scheduling. So you can say, run the sync operations every month, every hour, whatever works best for you. You can run incremental syncs or full syncs. So incremental sync is in case you want to make sure that only the updated documents flow through, and you make sure that your index is up to date. But there's a very, very important feature that our connectors also have, which we refer to as the identity crawler. Now, many data sources, like SharePoint, Slack, have the concept of local users and groups. What this is basically a permissions group that is defined within the application, but not in your identity provider. Now, it is extremely important for any generative AI assistant to be knowledgeable about these things. And our connectors make sure we have identity crawlers that make sure that they take the information about local users and groups as well, so that the ACLs or the access control permissions restrictions that we have are enforced for every scenario. So you're covered from all fronts as far as making sure users cannot access information that they're not allowed to access. All right, so that said, so to recap, we've learned about the end user features, where end users can do conversational Q&A, they can upload files, analyze content, they can generate new content, they can execute actions like create tickets across enterprise applications. Then we also talked about admin features, like being fully managed, having the connectors out of the box, security and permissions built in, as well as guardrails for responses. So now let's see how the end user experience actually is. Let's see the product in action. So earlier we talked about we had talked about different personas, and what better way to take one of those personas and see how they can leverage the product. So I'm going to talk about a sales manager, and the scenario is the sales manager has just inherited an account from a colleague, and they want to make sure that the transition is very, very smooth. Now let's say you're that sales manager. What's some of the first things that you would want to do? So you probably want to know, well, what does the target customer even do? Why are they even interested in our product? What's been the summary so far? Who are the key stakeholders? Let's see how the sales manager uses Amazon Q to answer all of these questions and be prepared to meet with the customer. So in this case, the sales manager works for a tax and accounting SaaS company called Any Company Tax, and the target customer is Example Corp. So let's see how they use Q to be prepared. So they start with, tell me about Example Corp. What do they do? That's probably the first thing that you want to know. And Q is looking at all of the different data sources, comes up with an answer. Now, you're not sure whether the answer is accurate, so you click on the document and verify, yes, founded in 1975, 50,000 employees, retail company, 1,500 stores, all that checks out. Really builds trust with the user. Then next you want to ask, well, why are they interested in a new product? I mean, they're an old company, they probably already have something. Why go for something new now? And what are they interested in? Again, it is pulling answers from some meeting notes that probably the previous account manager had. You go and see, okay, if their existing system is 10 plus years old, lacks newer features, not cloud-based, they're looking for more automation, more scalability. Checks out. Then you want to know who the key stakeholders are. And again, this will pull all of this from the meeting notes. Now the manager wants to know, well, what's the current status of the engagement? Where have we gotten with the customer so far? And so you pull up a long list of things. They notice there's a POC trial that's already happened. The final steps is about, they like the product, but they want to finalize usage and pricing. So they get curious about, well, did they get any credits for the POC? Yes, they got 10,000 credits. That's also coming from one of the meeting notes. But just to make sure that number is right, yes, verified, accurate. OK, so now the manager feels comfortable. They're ready to go meet with the customer. They get into the meeting. And of course, new questions come up. And you want to be sure that you're prepared to be able to answer those questions because you want to be knowledgeable about the product. So now, again, they turn to Q with those questions. So they ask about what languages are supported in your product. Because they are in about 50 countries, they want to make sure that they support all of those languages. And this time, the answers come from the documentation. And all of these documents, they can exist in any repositories that you have. We have 40+ connectors, any of those, and it will pull information from any of those sources. Then there's a question about countries that also pulled up from the documentation. Then example corp says, well, OK, we have 500 users. What will the pricing look like? Sales manager puts the same question to Q. Q actually pulls up the sales playbook, figures out that the price is actually $100 per user. But wait, there's also a discount table. If the deal size is about a certain size, you get a discount. So it takes that discount into account, adds it to it, explains the calculations, and gives the final deal size. Now, the next thing they probably want to do is, OK, I want to send this information to the customer. At the same time, I want to send this information to my sales ops teams to draft a contract that I can get started with the customer. Now, that happens through a ticketing system like Jira. So all the manager has to do is take all of this information, summarize it, and create a ticket on Jira for the sales ops team. And you can see the description, everything contains that summarized information. All you're doing is putting in your email to make sure you're the right person filing the ticket, and done. It's all right. It's all done right from the Q application. And next, you ask Q to summarize all of this information and say, well, create an email or write an email for the key stakeholders, summarizing this pricing information that I can send to the customer. It does that for you. You can start with this draft and work on it and be ready to send. Let's take a look at another example. Same person, different scenario. They get an Excel file with the sales performance data for the year. And they want to write a narrative based on this for a report for upper management. Q is the first place to start. They upload the file in Q and say, what's in this file? And Q summarizes and says, yeah, it contains sales data, January to October, North America. There's self-service customers, there's revenue, there's high-touch customers, there's breakdown. You ask it to list down all the columns, tells you that. And then more questions about how is it in October. And it pulls the numbers and says, well, in October, you're slightly behind, slightly lower than the target. Then the manager says, well, can you write me a narrative on the revenue trend? And it writes the narrative for you. But then a new question comes up. Well, I wanted to know a little bit more about the split in revenue between high-touch and low-touch customers, because probably they want to add it to the narrative. So they ask that question. Again, get an answer from the file that they uploaded. All right, I like it. Can you add the part about the split to the narrative you wrote about? And we're good to go. Now, that's the demo for using the Q application that is pre-built. But we come across customers who often say that, hey, we have our own UI, and we want to embed Q into our UI, or we want to use it in another application. So let's take a look at an example of how you can embed this into Slack and what the experience looks like. So now Bob is actually chatting directly with Amazon Q. He asks about DynamoDB, gets a really good answer about the service, how much it can handle. You can see that all of the features we talked about, the sources, the verification, you can bring all of these things here because we have APIs for all of that. You can ask follow-up questions, keeps the context. Is it fast? Yes, it will give you all the information about how it is fast along with the sources. Now, this is about chatting directly with Q. But Slack has its own features, and Q and Slack combined together can become even more powerful. Let's see an example of how this works in a multi-person thread. So now Gary has a question for Bob. He wants to bring in some data from social network websites, and he's asking whether he should use SQS or Kinesis. Now, Bob is not sure. He thinks it's SQS, not sure. So Gary asks him further, well, OK, if SQS, is it with FIFO? But Bob is still not sure. And so he decides to take Q's help. So all he's doing is, OK, let's ask Amazon Q. Q jumps into the conversation. It has the context of the entire conversation. It has all of the data that has been indexed into the service. It, of course, has the intelligence, the natural language understanding, takes all of that together and says, well, based on the conversation history and everything that is being indexed, here's my response. OK, Bob likes it, says this to Gary. Now, Bob wants Q again to help summarize the whole conversation and say, well, tell me what the action items are for me. And Q does that for you as well. So I'm really excited to see how builders will actually use this in different situations, and very excited about the potential that this is going to bring. OK, so we looked at examples of how this could be used, what the Q application looks like, how you could embed this into another application. But the next burning question is, well, how long does it take to get there, to get where we showed where we are right now? And the good news is it's a few simple steps. And so let's look at the console, at the experience for admins, and what it takes to build an experience like this. Right, so this is what the console looks like on the landing page. You start with creating an application. So you specify some basic parameters, create the application. Next step, you select a retriever. This is where all of the documents will be ingested for semantic retrieval later on. We have two options. We have the native retriever. But if you already invested in something like Kendra, you can bring that in with a one-click integration. Then comes the part about connecting your data sources. As I mentioned earlier, we have 40+ data sources. In this case, we will use Amazon S3. You can see the configuration page for S3. We got a lot of different features we talked about earlier, the sync mode. You can also specify metadata, that what metadata should be mapped to what in the S3 to make the search better. So you've created the S3 data source now, and you're finished. Your application is now created. Now you want to go and check whether the content is actually ingested into Q, into your instance. So the connector is building up. Once it's ready, you hit sync now to make sure all of the content that is in S3 is actually ingested into the index. Once that is done, we have a preview web experience for admins, just to check and see what the end user experience will look like. And that's it. This is the process for you to get started. Admins can start asking questions, start getting responses. Now, if you want to take this experience, deploy it to your end users, all you need to do is whatever identity provider you have, Okta, Azure AD, Ping Identity, you need to connect it to that, and you get a URL that you just deploy to your end users, and they can get started quickly. So that's the end of the demo section. And with that, I will hand it back to Vikram to talk about the Gen AI challenges that we introduced. How are we solving those with everything that you saw?
Thank you, Nikhil. That was an awesome demo. All right. We spoke about the three challenges at the beginning. Now let's look at how Q addresses each of these challenges. For accuracy, as you saw, we're able to use your enterprise content to give you accurate answers and also show you the sources so that you can verify that it's not hallucinating, and give you specific citations for every point in the answer that Q is giving you. Plus, we also give you flexibility of uploading your own files and analyzing them. For security and control, we spoke about how we respect the access control lists as well as the permissions and groups that have been set up within your enterprise. And the ability to configure and the guardrails at a really nuanced level so that it behaves exactly the way you want it in your enterprise. From a time to value perspective, you get the 40 connectors, so you can quickly index any repository across your enterprise. And we also have an SDK in case there is a repository which is not among the 40 that we support. You can quickly build a connector for your own repositories as well. It comes with the inbuilt intelligence built in, all of the indexing, and all the work that goes into it. That a lot of you that have tried to build such a system, might have realized. And then the integration with SSO, which again makes it super easy for you to deploy this in your enterprise. Imagine you just connected to Okta, and now this is another SSO-enabled application that any of your employees can just log into and start using. So now to bring it all together, we started with the work that the marketing manager has to do. And now all they need to do is open up Q and say, Q, summarize this product requirement document. They get the list. Q, write me a blog that focuses on all of these benefits for customers. They can also ask Q to help optimize the search engine optimization strategy for their blogs. Ask you to write advertising copy, and so on. And similarly, the research R&D scientists that we spoke about can do all of that analysis of trials, comparing the side effects of various trials, writing up their findings as a summary, sending and sharing it with their colleagues. All of those use cases can be now done with Amazon Q. With that, I'd like to invite on stage our customer, Sri, to talk about how they have used Q in their organization. Welcome, Sri.
Great. Thank you, Vikram. Hi, everyone. I'm Sri Santhanam, EVP of Analytics and AI at Experian. At Experian, many of you may know us as a global leader in information services and technology. We host among the most valuable data sets on the planet, 1.5 billion people. That's the number of people whose consumer information we handle. As Vikram talked about, privacy, security, responsibility is paramount for us. We have information on 200 million plus businesses and span over 40 countries. And a core part of our mission is financial inclusion. It's an area which cuts pretty close to me personally as an immigrant coming from India. Growing up as a child, my parents had very limited means to perform some of the major life challenges we had. Financial access was quite limited, and we had to rely largely on networks. So financial inclusion is paramount for us, and we see that as an important mission. And for decades now, we've been using AI to further that cause. With generative AI, we see that as having a tremendous amount of potential to amplify that mission for financial inclusion. Once the meteor hit Earth around generative AI about a year ago, we've been looking at a number of use cases on how generative AI can help us with products, productivity, and across the enterprise. But a little bit of a story as we think about our strategy. I have an 11-year-old son, and this was about 9 months ago. And as most 11-year-old kids, he's quite fascinated and addicted to digital. He's got a Nintendo Switch and watches all of the shows you'd expect. And we don't like that, of course, as many of our parents would imagine here. And he's not allowed to use his Nintendo during the week. But one day, it's about 6 months ago, he comes and sits us down, sits me and my wife down, and he's heard about Amazon's PR FAQs and their documents. And he's 11 years old, and he presents this 3-page essay titled "The Case for 10 Minutes of Screen Time During the Week," in which he talks about dopamine addiction. He argues both sides, and he presents that. And I look at that and say, like, I could not have written that essay even when I was in college. And here you have a child who has figured out that this is a way to influence 2 of his parents, speaks their language. And my wife was like, I was actually okay with it, but my wife was convinced. And if he can do that, what we realized as a company, that the biggest thing we needed to do with generative AI was what you see on the right-hand side, grassroots innovation. We were not going to unlock this by getting the 10 smartest people in the company, locking them in a conference room and saying, figuring it out. This really was going to happen by letting people across the company, the 22,000 people we had, use this, understand how it can be used, develop use cases. Of course, the left-hand side was paramount. Our focus is impact and financial inclusion and benefit for our businesses and customers and consumers. But promoting grassroots innovation was key. And that's where we see Amazon Q coming in as a pretty important vehicle. 3 big reasons why Amazon Q resonated with us. One, and I'll try and tie back to Vikram's 3 things. I think it was accuracy, security, and time to value, which really made sense for us. First, it's a fairly low technical lift, fully managed application. We could get up and running within a matter of hours, which made a huge lot of sense to us because we had 250 plus use cases. Second, the time to value. Without this, we were looking at weeks, days, months even for some of these use cases, and we needed to handle this in a secure and responsible way. And third, unlocking the value of our core assets and our data. We have some of the most valuable data sets on the planet, and not just structured data, but also unstructured data. And this is very important for us. So Amazon Q certainly resonated with us. Here are some examples of the sort of things we did with Amazon Q. One for the spannerheads in the crew here, the engineers will appreciate. We have, as you're coding and committing code, there's often detailed technical documentation as we build applications with infrastructure code, DevOps code that you have to follow. And I've had folks in our team say they spend at times 45 minutes, an hour reading through specifics on how even 5 lines of code need to be written just to understand it. And Amazon Q really allows you to have a dialogue with that whole document and allows you to skip that whole 45 minutes and understand what you're looking for, understand the specifics. So quite a much more than a mundane lookup or search. It's a thoughtful connection of various forms of language, technical documentation, which comes out with results. Vikram and Nikhil talked about product and sales, and we also see it as an important use case for us in coaching our technical and non-technical employees. So early days, but a number of powerful examples. And ultimately, we'd love to have a plethora of agents who help us unlock a lot of our productivity and value. So what we built, you're seeing here as an example of one of those use cases. What we particularly liked here was the secure connectivity to some of our existing data sources, the whole engineering layer, which you can often underestimate when you're trying to take use cases like these into production. So with secure access control, appropriate permissions, connecting via Okta to Confluence and some of our internal web pages. It was able to do a nice job. And this one, give or take, took like a few hours. The core portion of this took about 30 minutes, but relatively short time. And ultimately for us, early days, but we're seeing business impact in 3 key areas. First, increased engagement. We expect our customers, our employees to be able to engage much better with our products, our services, amplify the impact. Faster time to value. Certainly, it allows for a lot more experimentation. It allows us to reduces the cost of trying many of these things. So it drives innovation in many ways. And finally, secure and safe. As I said, we have among the most valuable data sets on the planet. We have all your data, and security and safety is paramount for us. So we want this to be handled in a safe, secure, and responsible manner. So we're excited about what we'll see and more to come over here. So look forward to the partnership with Vikram and team. Thank you, Vikram. Back to you.
Thank you, Sri. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Hope you all enjoyed it. That's a list of other related sessions that you should check out. Feel free to take a picture if you'd like. Please fill out the survey as well at the end of it. And here's a few links to help you get started. I'll leave it on for a moment in case you want to take pictures of our webpage, console, developer guide. And with that, thank you all. And we'll be here if you have further questions. So.